I'm not sure whether I hope I've got that right, assertion that, about saying boo to a goose at all. I've been very, very clear the support that we're giving to Mr Taylor, and that, at this time we have no evidence that this arrest is linked to his whistleblowing on corruption.
We have 21 withdrawn. Oh, Chris Matheson. Chris Matheson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The only reason that we have any idea at all about this murky, corrupt and usually criminal world of offshore tax havens is because of leaks such as the Paradise or the Panama Papers, or now the activities of Mr Taylor. So does the Minister not share our the concerns on this and other sides of the House, that there will be fewer such leaks that will help us to bring these tax havens to justice and to stop their nefarious activities, which frankly are corrupting huge parts of the way the world operates?
I mean, of course, Mr Speaker, I would always be concerned about stories around corruption, as he would expect. But I have to reiterate that in the case of Mr Taylor, that we have no evidence that this arrest is linked to his whistleblowing on corruption at SBM Offshore. And I would just, end by saying we are continuing to give Mr Taylor, consular support through the FCDO.
Wish the Minister a happy birthday. In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business, safe arrival of those participating in the next, I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes. Order. You switched on. I call the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, to make the statement. Does the Exchequer?
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to take this opportunity to update the House on our plans for one of the UK's most productive and innovative sectors, financial services. Financial services will be essential to our economic recovery from coronavirus, creating jobs and growth right across our country. And as we leave the European Union and start a new chapter in the history of financial services in this country, we want to renew the UK's position as the world's preeminent financial centre. My honourable friend, the Economic Secretary, will lay the foundations later through the Financial Services Bill. And I'd like to put that bill into context now by setting out for the House our plans to make this country more open, more technologically advanced, and a world leader in the use of green finance. Mr. Speaker, financial services have been fundamental to Britain's economic strength for centuries, and they remain fundamental today. The vigour and creativity of this industry adds over £130 billion of value to the UK economy, employs over 1 million people, and has been a critical source of revenues to support the NHS through coronavirus, contributing nearly £76 billion in tax receipts last year. And let us put paid once and for all to the myth that financial services and the City of London are synonyms. 2/3 of the people employed in financial and professional services work outside London, in places like Edinburgh, Leeds, Durham, Cardiff and Belfast. And around half of all financial services exports come from outside London too, with the North and Midlands alone exporting as much as the entire financial services industry of France. Mr. Speaker, this is the start of a new chapter for financial services. The industry is better regulated, better capitalised, and more resilient than in 2008. Coronavirus has reminded us financial services are essential services, and the whole House will share my gratitude to the people keeping their local bank branches open, supporting vulnerable customers, and working at extraordinary pace to deliver over £60 billion of new loan schemes, reminding us that this industry is at its best when it puts the interest of consumers first. And as we leave the European Union, we have an opportunity to set out a new vision for this sector. A vision based not on a race to the bottom, but for a financial services industry that is open, is innovative, and leads the world in the use of green finance. I'm taking 3 steps towards this vision today. Mr. Speaker, our first task as we write this new chapter for financial services is to give certainty on our approach to regulation after we leave the transition period. One of the central mechanisms for managing our cross-border financial services activity with the EU and beyond is equivalence. I remain firmly of the view that it is in both the UK and EU's interests to reach a comprehensive set of mutual decisions on equivalence. Throughout, our ambition has been to manage these cooperatively with the EU. But it is now clear that there are many areas where the EU is simply not prepared to even assess the UK. So we need to now decide on how best to proceed. Of course, we will always want a constructive and engaged relationship with the European Union. But after 4 years, I think it is time for us to move forward as a country and do what's right for the UK. To provide certainty and stability to industry and deliver our goal of open, well-regulated markets, I'm publishing today a set of equivalence decisions for the EU and EEA member states. Of course, we're ready to continue the conversation where we haven't yet been able to take decisions. But in the absence of clarity from the EU, we're acting unilaterally to provide certainty to firms both here and in Europe. I'm also publishing today a detailed framework for our approach to equivalence more generally. Our approach here will be simple. We will use equivalence when it is in the UK's economic interests to do so, taking a technical, outcomes-based approach that prioritises stability, openness, and transparency. And of course, we now have the freedom to build new, deeper financial services relationships with countries outside the European Union. We're making good on that promise already, progressing our partnership with Switzerland, the second biggest financial hub in Europe after the UK. With India, holding a significant economic and financial dialogue just 2 weeks ago, and with Japan, agreeing a new partnership that goes further than the EU's own financial services arrangements. But, Mr. Speaker, equivalence is not our only tool to ensure openness as a jurisdiction. Control of our own regulatory regime means we need to be clear with our trading partners about how our overseas firms access the UK's markets in a way that is predictable, safe and transparent. So I'm announcing today that we'll launch a call for evidence on our overseas regime before setting out our future approach next year. To boost the number of new companies who want to list here in the UK, I'm setting up a task force to make recommendations early next year on our future listings regime. To build on the 113,000 jobs already supported by investment management, we'll shortly publish a consultation on reforming the UK's regime for investment funds. To encourage UK pension funds to direct more of their £500 billion of capital towards our economic recovery, I'm committing today to the UK's first long-term asset fund being up and running within a year. And to make sure UK financial services exports to the EU remain competitive, we will treat those exports the same as we do for other countries. This means UK firms will be able to reclaim input VAT on financial services exports to the EU. Support for British industry and jobs worth £800 million. Mr. Speaker, we're known in this country not just for our openness, but for our ingenuity and inventiveness too. So the second part of our new financial chapter for financial services will use technology to deliver better outcomes for consumers and businesses. So we are building on our existing strengths as a leading global destination to start, grow and invest in fintech. And I look forward to welcoming Ron Khalifa's report in this important area. We're staying at the cutting edge of payments technologies, where we've just concluded the first stage of our payment landscapes review and will shortly publish new plans to support the sector. And by making sure our regulatory environment is ready to manage the far-reaching implications of technology on money itself. We'll publish a consultation shortly to make new forms of privately issued currencies, known as stablecoins, meet the same high standards we expect of other payment methods. And the Bank of England and the Treasury are considering further if central banks can issue their own digital currencies as a complement to cash. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this new chapter means putting the full weight of private sector innovation, expertise and capital behind the critical global effort to tackle climate change and protect the environment. We're announcing the UK's intention to mandate climate disclosures by large companies and financial institutions across our economy by 2025, going further than recommended by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, and the first G20 country to do so. We're implementing a new green taxonomy, robustly classifying what we mean by green to help firms and investors better understand the impact of their investments on the environment. And to meet growing investor demand, the UK will, subject to market conditions, issue our first ever sovereign green bond next year. This will be the first in a series of new issuances as we look to build out a green curve over the coming years, helping to fund projects to tackle climate change, finance much needed infrastructure investment and create green jobs across this country. Mr. Speaker, we've set out today our vision for this new chapter in the UK's financial services industry, a vision of a global, open industry where British finance and expertise is prized and sought after in Europe and beyond. A technologically advanced industry using all its ingenuity to deliver better outcomes for consumers and businesses. A greener industry using innovation and finance to tackle climate change and protect our environment. And above all, an industry that serves the people of this country, acting in the interests of communities and citizens, creating jobs, supporting businesses, and powering growth as we direct all our strength towards economic recovery. And I commend this statement to the House.
We now come to the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer and Lee Stoltz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've become used to disjointed, last-minute policy making recently in this House. Today's events, with a statement entitled "The Future of Financial Services" on the very day the Financial Services Bill was being debated, surely takes this to new heights. Now, the UK produces 1% of global emissions, but companies and financial institutions based here produce 15% of those emissions. Action from government to match the green ambitions of many in financial services can't come too soon. Recent developments have unfortunately gone in the wrong direction. Over the last decade, the UK has pumped £6 billion into overseas fossil fuel projects via UK export finance. So will the Chancellor do as Labour has demanded and immediately ban the financing of fossil fuel projects through UK export finance? Labour supports the move to greater disclosure of climate-related information, and 2 months ago we called on this government to show leadership and introduce mandatory reporting ahead of COP26. The Chancellor's announcement and that of the FCA this morning are positive, but they're only relating to a comply or explain basis, with full implementation not set for many years, not until 2025. The climate crisis demands bolder action. Will the Chancellor move to mandatory reporting in the 2021-22 reporting year? Now again, the introduction of green gilts is welcome, Mr Speaker, but these are mechanisms, not ends in themselves. They obviously depend on where the money raised is then invested. So far this year, the UK Government has announced around £5 billion in green investment. That compares with £36 billion in Germany and £27 billion in France. Where is this government's ambition for a green recovery from the coronavirus crisis? And where is the replacement for the Green Investment Bank that the Conservatives sold off? Now, of course, the financial sector is, as the Chancellor rightly said, critically important in ensuring that start-ups and scale-ups can access the capital they need to grow and succeed. So important right now. But that must go hand in hand with oversight and protection. The drive to encourage more tech companies to list on our stock exchange can't come at the expense of corporate responsibility. So what will he do to ensure the long-term health of British companies and the protection of British investors? And where's the action here to protect people's access to local bank branches and to cash on their high streets? There's more in this statement about stable coins, hardly the talk of living rooms up and down the land, than there is about people's access to cash. Now, Mr Speaker, while we debate these often welcome measures, we mustn't forget the elephant in the room. This government's mishandling, I'm calling it that because that's what it is, of ensuring market access for our firms to our largest trading partner. Mr Speaker, 1 in every 14 UK workers are employed in financial and related professional services. Yet the City of London Corporation recently said approaches to negotiations make them feel like the neglected child of an acrimonious divorce. With weeks to go until we leave the transition period, we still don't know whether the EU will determine that our rules are equivalent to theirs. The Chancellor's predecessor said achieving equivalence on day one should not be complicated. The deadline for achieving equivalence was June of this year. By that date, out of 28 forms the UK needed to complete, it had filled in just 4. This government can't even complete the paperwork on time to secure market access for our largest export industry. The Chancellor said that today he was setting out our approach to equivalence. That should have been done months ago. It's such a critical aspect of the UK's economy. And we've seen damage already being done. Ernst & Young's research suggests over 7,000 jobs have already gone, £1.2 trillion in assets set to be relocated from the UK, and potentially worse to come as firms making plans decide not to locate those plans and those jobs within our borders. It's too late now to strike a deal that would preserve market access securely. Too late now. A phrase, sadly, we're coming to associate with this Chancellor. But let me ask him, When did one of our most important sectors fall so far down his list of priorities? Thank you.
To the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was hoping this would be a rather more technical discussion, but I think it was telling from the honourable lady opposite that we had all those questions, but not really, until the last sentence, any word of praise or recognition for this industry. Right? Absolutely trying to score political points, no recognition, and sneering and sniding at the importance of this industry up and down the country, all the people that are employed in it. Right? No recognition whatsoever. And in fact, when I made this statement about those hard-working people in this industry who were making sure that customers had access to their branches, access to loans during the coronavirus, all I heard was muttering. That isn't the right praise for the people in this industry, because they have been working very hard, and it is appropriate that they get the recognition that they deserve from that, and they will get that from this government. To return to her substantive question, she asked about the TCFD disclosures, Mr. Speaker. She asked about Comply and Explain. Indeed, Comply and Explain is the approach that others have taken. We will be the first major economy, the first in the G20 to mandate disclosures by 2025. There is a roadmap that has been published today. It is the most ambitious timetable that any major economy has done to date. In fact, it goes far beyond what was recommended by the task force themselves, and I think it is something that we, at least on this side of the House, will be very proud of. She asked about access to cash, Mr. Speaker. She should know that in the middle of October, on about the 15th, we published our access to cash call for evidence is something I announced at Back and Budget in March, and the responses to that will inform our future legislative strategy. We laid that out clearly that we believe is it important that everyone has access to cash, and depending on the responses to that consultation, we will decide on the appropriate next steps. Then she also, I think, commented on our response to the equivalence the equivalence process from our EU partners. And I think she was trying to accuse us of being slow in replying, or not quite replying sufficiently. Well, that will be news to the team that have spent months producing 2,500 pages of responses to those Commission responses. I might add, actually, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Lady seems more willing to defend the EU in their conduct of this process, we haven't had a single question back from the European Union after sending 2,500 pages of responses over to them. I might also add that we didn't feel it necessary to send them thousands and thousands of pages, Mr. Speaker. We adopted a constructive approach that required very little answers, given that we know their current regulatory arrangements, because we all share the same ones. But that said, Mr. Speaker, we have chosen to take an approach that does prioritise financial services. Rather than wait, we have acted unilaterally to provide certainty to our financial services firms, to enshrine our reputation as a place where global firms can come and do business, because this will always be the most open, the most competitive and the most innovative place to do financial services anywhere in the world.
We have two withdrawn, so I'm coming to Alison Thulis, the SNP spokesperson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I just start by picking the Chancellor up on one particular thing that he said to the Shadow Chancellor, that he was expecting a technical discussion. Well, a technical discussion might have been possible if we hadn't received a heavily redacted statement at 1 minute to 4, which is disgraceful and disrespectful to this side of the House. And he does it time and time again, Mr. Speaker, and it's just not on. Mr. Speaker, financial services are of huge importance to Scotland, and I know the Chancellor didn't mention Glasgow, where we have the huge Barclays complex coming out of the ground as a sign of confidence in the Scottish economy. And it is not uncommon that financial services companies have been planning on moving their assets from London to elsewhere in the UK, and he really needs to get behind that. Things have to be moved out of the City of London right across these islands, because these jobs are important, good quality jobs. But this year, coronavirus has overtaken Brexit for financial services in terms of focus and capacity, and as a consequence, there's been a significantly reduced bandwidth for people working in financial service companies to prepare for the disastrous consequences of Brexit. So can the Chancellor tell us how you will support companies across the line in their preparations, particularly when we don't know what we're preparing for, when details of the relationship with Europe are quite so scarce? Because we still don't know what that relationship is going to look like. And given that instability and uncertainty are an anathema to the financial sector, can the Government provide any clarity for what people ought to be preparing for in only a few short weeks' time? We welcome the introduction of green gilts. It's something that the Treasury Select Committee has been looking at, and 16 other countries, including Germany and Sweden, have done that. But can he tell us how this will impact in Scotland, what discussions he's been having with the Scottish Government on this, and how will he ensure that Scotland gets its fair share of any investment to come? And will the UK Government take this opportunity with new financial powers to back the transition to a low-carbon future, to accelerate its net zero targets and to match the Scottish Government's ambitious commitments? Mr Speaker, equivalence is a point in time, and as the UK diverges, there is a huge risk to our access to European markets. As the ABI have pointed out, equivalence has been used in the past as a political weapon. So how does he plan to mitigate this in the future? And lastly, the Government must put its own house in order on green issues. It must work. The Treasury has a good opportunity to work across different government departments to ensure that all government departments, such as UK Export Finance has been mentioned, that they are all making their contribution to a greener future, and that he must take this seriously right across different departments if he's going to come to COP26 in Glasgow next year with anything worth the candle. Thank you.
Mr Speaker, the Honourable Lady talked about moving jobs out of London. I think the good point to acknowledge that it already is the case that the majority of financial and professional services jobs are already out of London, 2/3, and I completely agree with her. Scotland has a proud heritage in financial services, and long may that continue. With regard to providing certainty for firms and the support given to them, she will be aware that we already put in place a temporary permissions regime some time ago that provided that certainty to overseas firms needing to continue operating here after we leave the transitions period. They've known about that for a while, and it has been warmly welcomed. With regard to specific financial support, I would point her to the announcements on input VAT, which will ensure that UK exports of financial services to the EU are not at a competitive disadvantage. Those firms will be able to reclaim input VAT, which will be worth several £100 million in benefit to those wherever they might be in the UK. She asked, I think, also about the ABI. I think they will warmly welcome the review that we have put in place on Solvency II. The feature of our particular insurance industry is the prevalence of long-term annuities. The capital treatment of those is not well managed by European rules, and there's an opportunity for us to improve things in that area, which is why the ABI, I think, have warmly welcomed our review into the Solvency II insurance regulations. And lastly, she talked about equivalence as a political weapon, I think. Our approach, whether others might wish to use equivalence as a political weapon, as I set out today, that will not be our approach. We will approach equivalence in a technical way, in an outcomes-based way, and seek always to provide transparency and stability, because, Mr Speaker, we believe that in doing that, we will cement our reputation as the best place to do financial services in the world.
4 withdrawn, so we go to Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I listened very carefully to the Chancellor, and he announced a green curve, a landscape review, a call for evidence, a task force, and, God help us, a roadmap. Where's the bold action that's really needed on green jobs and on green finance? What people want is not a technical discussion, but the sort of initiative that will allow things like the Swansea Bay tidal lagoon to actually be developed. Is he just paralysed by Treasury orthodoxy, which killed that key green project?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman asked about bold action, and when it comes to green measures, what we've announced today is that we will be the first major economy in the world to mandate the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-related Financial Disclosures, doing so across the economy by 2025. I think that demonstrates both boldness and leadership on this vital issue.
Robert Largan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Financial services are worth over £130 billion to the UK economy and support over 1 million jobs, crucially 2/3 of which are outside of London. So I wholeheartedly welcome this statement. I also welcome the announcement of the sovereign green bonds. Can the Chancellor confirm that those bonds will help fund crucial projects to tackle climate change, for example, like the restoration of the moorlands in the Peak District, or vital infrastructure investment that can help improve public transport across the north of England?
Mr Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The transition to net zero will require enormous sums of capital to help finance, and this bond will ensure, along with all the other market developments that it will catalyse, that we can attract that capital into the UK to build the infrastructure we need.
We now go to Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor, was right to raise the fact that this government needlessly sold off the Green Investment Bank in 2017, because when the transition period ends and we cease to be part of the European Investment Bank, we'll become the only country in Europe without a public investment bank. So can I ask the Chancellor, how does he propose to fill this gap in our green finance ambitions?
Mr. Speaker, I'd urge the honourable gentleman to wait for the imminent publication of the National Infrastructure Strategy, which will address that specific concern.
Rob Butler.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the announcement of a sovereign green bond, and may I congratulate my honourable friend for Grantham and Stamford for his tireless campaigning on this issue. Can my right honourable friend say whether he agrees with me that these green gilts will help tackle climate change and create green jobs in firms of all sizes, including the many micro-businesses in my constituency of Aylesbury?
Chancellor.
I think my honourable friend is absolutely right. The transition to net zero will create enormous economic opportunity for companies large and small, and I know that he will champion his small businesses as they seek to benefit from it and help not just drive our recovery, but also create jobs in his local area.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Chancellor mentioned that jobs are leaving London for the rest of the UK. I would point out that jobs are leaving the UK for Europe. Assets are leaving at a frightening rate, 1.2 trillion. Now, the announcement about the Green Guilds is welcome, but again, it is too late. We had a Green Investment Bank in this country, and at that point, we could claim to be ahead in the fight on climate change. So does the Chancellor appreciate why constituents like mine in Edinburgh West, the second largest financial sector base in this country, are concerned that this government simply is not on top of what is happening and up to date with what this country's economy needs?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, what the financial services sector needs is a vision for the future that will ensure that we remain the most competitive place to do financial services in the world. And the announcements that we've made today will ensure that that becomes a reality.
Number 10 withdrawn. So, Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Chancellor for his statement and for bringing very often to this chamber some good news. The Chancellor is absolutely right about the financial and professional services work outside London. And in Belfast, there's some 24,000 jobs. They're playing a very significant and key role. So therefore, all of the United Kingdom and Great Britain and Northern Ireland benefits, bearing in mind the need for SMEs to export their products and services to the global economy. And for that to happen and take place, the financial services and banks must be regulated by the FCA in a more efficient way. Could I ask the Chancellor to outline how this can be done and how it can be better achieved? Thank you.
Chancellor.
Well, I point the honourable gentleman to the Phase 2 consultation that's currently outstanding of our future regulatory framework review, Madam Deputy Speaker, and the key purpose of that review is to ensure our regulatory regime, after we leave the transition period, is fit for purpose and will take into account a wide range of inputs from stakeholders, and I'd urge him and his small businesses to feed into it.
Sir Robert Neal.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I particularly welcome the Chancellor's recognition that not only are financial services critical to our national interest, but they're also critical to the long-term funding of our public services. Against that background, and with a shared objective of maintaining the position of the sector, its preeminence, will he confirm that whilst we have set out our own equivalence decisions, we will continue to seek, wherever possible, the closest agreement and alignment with the EU, which remains an important market, and the door is not closed upon that? And secondly, that as we develop the very welcome proposals for a new regime for listings, and a new regime to deal with the investment funds and also with the overseas persons regime, he will not hesitate to draw on the very real expertise that exists, particularly in the City but elsewhere, for example through the International Regulatory Strategy Group and the Financial Markets Law Committee.
Chancellor.
My honourable friend has long been a fantastic champion and advocate for this sector, and he's right to be so. And I agree with him about the importance of making sure that our listings regime is as competitive as it can be to make sure that we attract companies to list here in London. I look forward to getting input from him and the bodies he mentioned in the forthcoming review that we have commissioned.
Now go to Joanna Cherry.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. But wouldn't the UK government be in a better position to deploy these bonds if it hadn't flogged off the Green Investment Bank, headquartered in my Edinburgh South West constituency? And will you consider passing these bond issuing powers to the devolved governments so they can be put to best effect in facilitating low carbon developments across the United Kingdom?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think sovereign gilt issues will remain a reserved competency, but I think what's clear is by creating a sovereign green bond market, one of our hopes is that will then catalyse a domestic green bond market. We've seen that elsewhere. It provides a benchmark for private companies to issue private green credit on, and hopefully that will provide more capital for more companies in every part of the UK.
Now go to Nigel Mills.
I thank him for his statement, asking if he would agree that our financial system should also be the cleanest in the world and free from dirty, criminal and corrupt money. And will he therefore look further at the idea of making it a failure to prevent economic crime right across our financial sector?
Chancellor.
Well, my honourable friend has rightly focused on this issue for as long as I've been in this House, and rightly so. He will know that we passed the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act just the year before last, but also in budget we consulted and said we would on an economic crime levy that we will introduce, which will provide additional funds to combat the scourge of crime in our financial system, and there will be further measures which my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary, will be outlining around market abuse in the bill after the statement.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We don't see very much of the Chancellor of the Exchequer here in this place, and I wonder what it could possibly be. What could it possibly be about Monday after the electoral routing over the weekend of populism in the USA that could possibly make the Chancellor of the Exchequer wants to come to the dispatch box this afternoon and speak about climate change. However, never mind the good management of his reputation, his government cannot escape the consequences of Brexit and the lack of the deal that was promised for financial services. They can't escape it, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given the shape of the UK's economy, the consequences of this will be far worse for those workers that we keep talking about in financial services outside London and in other regions. So can he confirm to me what he believes will be the relative regional impact of the current state of the Brexit negotiations, and what is his policy to stop Brexit making regional inequality even worse?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think it wouldn't right be to give a day-by-day commentary on the current negotiations, but as we heard from the Prime Minister at the weekend, we have made significant progress. Those talks are ongoing. It's clear that a deal can be done, but that will require both sides to continue to act in a constructive way, and we remain ready to do that and are working hard at it.
Nikki Aiken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome my right honourable friend's statement. Yet another statement. He seems to be here more often than not. Whilst I recognise the million-plus jobs that the financial services industry support, 2/3 outside of London, it is the City of London, within my constituency of the cities of London and Westminster, that is the heart of financial services in this country, supporting these jobs across the UK. So I welcome this statement, and I'd ask my right honourable friend, what further measures will the government take post-transition to ensure that the UK maintains and enhances this global competitiveness within the financial services sector?
Chancellor.
Well, my honourable friend is rightly proud of this industry given her constituency, and she's right that we should not rest on our laurels. We may be world-beating today, but we want to remain that way, the most competitive place to do business, which is why many of the initiatives that we've launched today, for example, the listings reform that was talked about, or the investment funds regime reform, will provide, or Solvency II indeed, will all provide opportunities for us to tweak and flex our regulation going forward, attract capital, attract business, so that the industry can continue to grow and go from strength to strength.
Now go to Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Citizens Advice Bureau tell us that 6 million of our constituents have already fallen behind on a bill during the pandemic. And one group exploiting the fintech explosion the Chancellor is talking about are the legal loan sharks of the credit sector. In the last financial crisis, the coalition government waited too late to act, and the Wongas of this world ripped off millions of our constituents. Yet now you are better protected if you take out a payday loan than a credit card debt, because at least the interest rate is capped. Chancellor, as millions of our constituents face a terrible Christmas, please learn the lessons of the last financial crisis when dealing with the financial sector. Please bring in a cap on the cost of all credit so that we make sure that some of those new fintechs, the buy now, pay laters of this world, are not the kinds of financial companies that we get coming to our shores to exploit our constituents yet again.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know the Honourable Lady has spent an enormous amount of time in this chamber focused on these issues, and rightly so. I know the FCA has currently taken action to address the issues in the buy now, pay later sector. But more generally to her question, important question around debt and consumer credit, it's worth bearing in mind that we've provided around £38 million to debt providers this financial year, bringing the total to £100 million. Colleagues will know that from May next year, the Breathing Space initiative that has recently passed in this place will provide a period for individuals who are struggling with debt issues to take a pause and agree a repayment plan. And indeed, my honourable friend in the bill later will be introducing provisions for us to introduce statutory debt repayment plans, which will further help those who are struggling paying back credit.
Now go to Raymond Chishti.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Chancellor for the statement and all the financial support he has given to my constituents in Gillingham and Rainham during COVID-19. My question is specifically with regards to the work of the Financial Ombudsman and the 6-month statute of limitation when dealing with complaints, as raised with me by a constituent in Gillingham and faced by constituents around the country. With all other ombudsmen, such as health and the Parliamentary Health Ombudsman, there is a 12-month statute of limitation. Can the Chancellor explain this discrepancy? Or would he be kind enough to take this matter away on behalf of my constituent in Gillingham and look at this anomaly and in the interest of fairness?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very happy to take the issue away and look forward to discussing it further with my honourable friend on behalf of his constituents.
Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have to say to the Chancellor that his announcement this afternoon will do little to stem the hemorrhaging of jobs and assets that we have seen since Brexit and the failure of his governance negotiations so far. But Germany earlier in the year announced a £46 billion investment in the green economy to stimulate recovery. Could I ask the Chancellor, how will his sovereign green bond intend to match this? And what discussions has he had, or does he intend to have, with the devolved administrations around these islands to discuss how the proceeds of any such bond issue might usefully be put to work?
Mr. Speaker, I point the honourable gentleman to our budget in March, where we set out a sense of the capital plans for the next few years, and what he will see there is plans to spend over £600 billion in capital investment in this country over the next 5 years, raising capital investment to the highest sustained level it's seen in almost half a century.
Now go to Craig Whittaker.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to my right honourable friend for his statement. Many of the 750,000 jobs outside of London in the financial services sector are located in places like West Yorkshire and in particular in Calderdale. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that keeping the UK at the forefront of financial service regulations, supporting an open and dynamic economy is the surest way to ensure we remain a competitive economy as we emerge from the coronavirus pandemic?
Chancellor.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. As we seek to drive our economic recovery from coronavirus, financial services can play a key part in that. But critical in ensuring that is making sure that we remain an open and, as he said, dynamic place which adapts with what's changing, and that's indeed what all our measures today ensure will happen.
Chris Bryant.
The great success of the financial services industry in this country sometimes means that it's also vulnerable to
threats from other people around the world who want to launder money through the British system. Of course, it's good that we now have a beneficial ownership register, but the threshold for that is 25%. Which is quite high, higher than some other countries. There are lots of companies that are granted exemptions by government ministers from having to show their real beneficial ownership. And the Companies House has next to no resources with which to investigate whether what is being told them by the individual companies is actually true. I just wonder whether it isn't time now for us to launch a further effort at tackling money laundering. And wouldn't it be good if the government were able to say as soon as possible that the overseas territories, which are part of this country's financial services institutions, were also publicly making available their beneficial ownership registers?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think more generally the honourable gentleman is absolutely right that this is an important issue which deserves our focus. I'm pleased that the Financial Action Task Force year before last judged the UK in their independent review to be one of the best regimes in the world for tackling money laundering. But with regard to the specific question about Companies House, he will know that there is currently an outstanding consultation on a review of the Companies House regime, and I look forward to hearing his thoughts on what we should do to take that forward.
Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I thank my right honourable friend for updating the House with a statement and for the plethora of statements he has offered to this House from time to time. And may I also remind those opposite that this is not a UK crisis, this is a world crisis, a pandemic, and that I thank my right honourable friend for everything he has done to help those in the financial sector and in the green economy. Many in Beaconsfield work in both those sectors. And may I ask him to outline to the House how green finance can be used in a way to build back the UK economy post-coronavirus, as well as meeting our climate change commitments and delivering a greener economy?
Chancellor.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I thank her for her warm comments. And she's right that we need this finance to develop new technologies which would help meet our climate ambitions. To give a couple of examples, carbon capture and storage is something that we can be a world leader in. Similarly with offshore wind, those are the kinds of investments that will need extra financing to help develop those technologies or further their export capability, and that's exactly the type of investment that this new capital will help fund.
Patricia Gibson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I confess I was surprised to hear of the Chancellor saying that he was grateful to the people keeping their local bank branches open. I now have 7 towns in my constituency with no bank and only 3 towns that do have access to a local bank, surely the hardest hit in the UK. If he really wants to help people keep bank branches open, when will he do more to ensure and help facilitate banking hubs in my constituency of North Ayrshire and Arran and across Scotland?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady will have heard my answer before about our plans to take forward initiatives on access to cash and protecting it. The outstanding consultation will conclude shortly, and then we will decide on a future legislative strategy.
Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My right honourable friend has put unprecedented help to people during this crisis, but tragically in my constituents, Elmet and Rothwell, almost 2,000 people have lost their jobs during this crisis. So does my honourable friend agree with me? As he mentioned in his statement, Leeds is a key financial hub in this country, and many of my constituents, if not employed directly in the financial services industry, are part of that support network around the financial services industry. And could I ask him to agree with me that the green bonds which come out will trickle down into small manufacturers, which I have a plethora of in my constituency? So can I ask my honourable friend to push ahead with great speed, and how quickly does he think he can get this recovery? Because what I've heard today from my right honourable friend, quite frankly, is jobs, jobs, jobs.
Chancellor.
My honourable friend is absolutely right about the importance of Leeds to our financial services ecosystem here in the UK, and he's right about the importance for jobs in his local economy. What I can tell him is we're keen to see the industry prosper across the country, in his constituency and elsewhere. One of the things that might be of interest to his constituents is the review we are launching of the UK funds regime, which will very specifically consider whether and how fund domicile activity could be focused in specific UK areas to support our levelling up agenda. I look forward to getting his contributions to that, and I know that his industry will continue to go locally from strength to strength.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The pandemic has accelerated the decline in the use of cash in the country.
But there are still 8 million people who say that it is an economic necessity, and many others who are employed in the cash industry, including in Warrington North. According to the National Audit Office, the Bank of England does not know the whereabouts of around 2/3 of note currency, about £50 billion, which may be in the shadow economy. Doesn't this show the need for a comprehensive plan for cash?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friend, the Economic Secretary, is absolutely abreast of this issue and has been for a while, which is why we have a strategy around protecting access to cash. We announced an intention to consult and potentially legislate at budget. The consultation is outstanding. I'd very much welcome her comments because she is right. Although the economy is transitioning in a digital way, we do need to protect access to cash for those who need it.
Now go to Andrew Griffith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I congratulate my right honourable friend on becoming the Climate Change Chancellor? And would he agree with me that private sector businesses and investors are fundamental to achieving our target of net zero? Only they have the capacity to innovate, to make changes in the supply chain, and to generate the prosperity that are going to make the choices we make as consumers and citizens much easier to accomplish.
Chancellor.
Well, as my honourable friend knows well from his own private sector experience, we absolutely need to attract private capital alongside public capital to deliver on all our ambitions, which is why a sovereign bond is so important, Madam Deputy Speaker, because it can also help catalyse a domestic private sector industry for corporates and other institutions to issue on the back of the government issuance. All of that will leverage private sector capital and expertise to build the infrastructure that we need.
Now go to Geraint Davis.
Madam Deputy Speaker, talking of private capital, Barclays has moved €200 billion out of the UK, 3,000 per person. JP Morgan has moved €200 billion out of the UK. HSBC has moved 1,000 jobs to Paris. The government has abolished the Green Investment Bank, and we're leaving the European Investment Bank. So if the Chancellor is serious about investment in green infrastructure, will he take a look at the Development Bank of Wales as a mechanism for focusing in on green infrastructure in a knowledgeable way, like the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon, so that taxpayers' money can be deployed effectively to both grow and green our economy?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we did last year actually have the Infrastructure Financing Review, which contemplated these specific questions. We will issue a response alongside the National Infrastructure Strategy, which I think will adequately address the honourable gentleman's questions.
James Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome my right honourable friend's statement today, particularly in terms of the issuing of green gilts. Will he confirm that the benefits of the sovereign green bond will be available alongside revenue support mechanisms to support hydrogen production and carbon capture and storage, as exemplified by the HyNet project for North West England and North East Wales?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, without commenting on specific projects, I think my honourable friend is right to highlight some of the areas of interest to the government. Carbon capture and storage, he will know we have already outlined over £800 million of investment over the next few years to help develop with the private sector 2 carbon and capture and storage clusters. This is something that the UK can be world leading on. It's important that we move quickly.
Now go to Dame Diana Johnson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the Shadow Chancellor pointed out in her excellent remarks, over the past decade, the United Kingdom, under successive Tory governments, has pumped £6 billion into climate-damaging fossil fuel projects overseas via UK export finance. So will the Chancellor now commit to ban this activity immediately and make it a priority to invest in British green energy industries in places like the Humber Estuary and create the future jobs we need for a real green northern powerhouse?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Lady will know in her area the importance of offshore wind, and I know she will have welcomed the Prime Minister's announcements for that sector, including an increase in the amount of domestically manufactured content as we look to build on our advantage as a user of offshore wind to make sure that we also build an advantage in manufacturing the turbines. It's exactly what she's asking for, and this government is in the process of delivering it.
Bim Afalami.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Chancellor's statement, and it foreshadows a huge increase in the powers for the FCA, a huge increase in the amount of legislation and regulations that will come through this House. I was wondering what thought the Chancellor may have given to establishing perhaps a specialist financial services select committee of this House, perhaps with some sort of oversight capacity, so that we can manage this huge influx of legislation and regulations once we get out of the transition period on the 1st of January.
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, not for me to suggest that the Treasury Select Committee needs something else to do, but my honourable friend is right that there will be a change in the regulatory alignment after leaving the transition period, which is why our future regulatory framework review is so important. We're just embarking on phase 2 of that, and that will consider the right balance between government, Parliament and the regulators, and that's the appropriate place for him to feed in his thoughts on how we can get that balance right.
Jonathan Edwards.
Diolch, Madam Deputy Speaker. In answer to the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West earlier in the statement, why did he rule out allowing the devolved governments to issue their own green bonds? Surely this would be one way to help the Welsh Government directly fund the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon project, considering that the Treasury views the contracts for difference model to be too costly.
Right.
Madam Deputy Speaker, obviously the Welsh Government will make its own decisions on supporting its own local economy. Issuance of sovereign bonds is obviously a reserved capability, and it's appropriate that it remains that way.
Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Short-termism in finance and public companies has long been a concern in the UK, so I welcome the measures my honourable friend is taking today, which build on the work of the Patient Capital Task Force. I welcome the review of Solvency II, which is potentially deterring long-term investment, and I welcome the long-term asset fund as well. But can my honourable friend set out, firstly, what he hopes it will achieve, and secondly, what metrics he will use to assess whether it's working or not?
Chancellor.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right about this. To give him a sense of what we're trying to achieve, we know that today, particularly defined contribution pension schemes are not particularly well invested in long-term illiquid instruments, roughly about 1% of their portfolios compared with about 10% for defined benefit schemes. If we can unlock that difference, that's worth tens and tens of billions of pounds of extra investment in long-term infrastructure and assets in this country. I think that's a valuable prize, and we will make a start on making that a reality next year.
Peter Kye.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join the Shadow Chancellor in celebrating the success and importance of the financial services sector in our country? The Chancellor said that he was making a unilateral announcement about equivalence. So can you confirm that now the British financial services sector now has to await for the EU to make its unilateral announcement about equivalence and other measures that will dictate what is possible in terms of access for British businesses? The government, and if I reflect, Madam Deputy Speaker, the government signed the political declaration which committed them to finding the agreement by June last year. If British business was as good as this government at doing deals, there would be no financial sector in this country.
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'll help clear up for the honourable gentleman. There are a set of decisions that we can make unilaterally. There are others that we can't, because the nature of the decision requires mutual collaboration between us and the other partner. So we have obviously refrained from making those decisions, and we've also refrained from making decisions where it would be in our economic, not in our economic self-interest to do so. But we remain and we stand ready to talk constructively and cooperatively with our European partners and reach agreement on the remaining outstanding decisions.
We now go to Mrs. Heather Wheeler.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank my right honourable friend for his statement. I strongly welcome the new sovereign green bond, an idea of a new bond that I've been promoting for many months, especially in the Far East. But can my right honourable friend explain how he will ensure that projects are actually invested in suitable projects?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I pay tribute to my honourable friend's campaigning on this important issue, and she asked the right question to make sure that the money is going to where we want it. I can give her the reassurance that we will be using the use of proceeds structure along with the principles from the International Capital Markets Association. This is the most widely used and recognised structure in the ESG investing space, and it is the structure that is used by pretty much all other sovereign issuers and will ensure the money raised goes to where it is required and deserves to go.
Mike Amesbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Credit unions have been a lifeline for many in local communities during this pandemic. What steps is the Chancellor taking to support credit unions and the mutual sector in terms of growth?
Thank you. Well, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right about the importance of credit unions, the importance of providing credit to those who need it. My honourable friend, the Economic Secretary, recently hosted a roundtable to make sure that the industry is getting the support that it requires.
36 withdrawn, so Ben Lake.
Diolch, Madam Deputy Speaker. The announcement of a sovereign green bond is to be welcomed as an important step forward in the financing of infrastructure and industries that will be essential to achieving net zero. But can I ask the Chancellor, what sort of access will the Welsh Government have to this important source of green finance to ensure that projects and priorities which fall under its remit are adequately supported, given that he seems to have ruled out empowering the Welsh Government to issue its own green bonds?
Chancellor.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the UK Government issues UK debt, and where there are spending where there is spending that has a Barnett implication, that money is provided to the Welsh Government. The sovereign bond is just a way of financing the expenditure of the United Kingdom. Those Barnett consequentials will always be provided if and when the appropriate expenditure is made for the Welsh Government to use as it sees fit.
Gareth David.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I warmly welcome the statement today, particularly around the issuance of a green gilt. It's a great idea. Can I ask the Chancellor, does he agree with me that the issuance of a green gilt marks a great opportunity to showcase Britain's place in the world in terms of our financial services power to move towards net zero by 2050?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I pay enormous tribute to my honourable friend? He has campaigned tirelessly, written tirelessly, and advocated tirelessly for many years for the UK to issue a sovereign green bond, and I know he will be heartened by the announcement today. He is absolutely right, and he knows better than most what a signal this will send across the world of our desire to be a global leader when it comes to green finance and deliver on all the ambitions that we have, which I know he will play a key part in making sure that we do.
Patrick Graydon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. He seems to be either deaf or in denial about some of what opposition members are saying to him today. Ernst & Young have calculated that over £1 trillion of assets are being moved out of the UK to the EU as a result of Brexit. Does he accept that? Is he proud of that? Does he think that's a price worth paying for Brexit? And does he seriously think what he's announcing today is going to mitigate that somehow?
Chancellor.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the announcements we're making today will ensure that the UK remains the most open, competitive, technology-leaning and dynamic place to do financial services anywhere in the world. It is a constantly changing industry, and it's right that we're on the cutting edge of what's happening. Now that we are outside of the EU and leaving the transition period, we actually have the ability to make further changes to our regulatory regime to enhance our competitiveness and attract jobs, capital and business to the UK.
Last question, Richard Fuller.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In response to the comment by the Member of Parliament for Wirral South earlier, I don't know where Labour MPs have been these last few weeks, but the Chancellor has been here today, the 9th of November, on the 5th of November, on the 22nd of October, on the 20th of October, on the 14th of October, on the 24th of September and the 15th of September. No Chancellor has been more responsive to the needs of members of Parliament than this Chancellor, Madam Deputy Speaker, which is why I welcome his statement today, which demonstrates that neither the financial services sector nor he as Chancellor in the UK are going to sit around and wait for the EU to respond, that he is going to point forward in leadership, in green finance, in financial technology and in financial transparency. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, may I ask my right honourable friend, will he build on his announcement today on the green sovereign bond so that ahead of COP26 there will be availability of retail investments for retail investors?
Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and he will know from his own extensive experience in financial services how important the announcements today are. I think he makes a very interesting suggestion, and I'd love to meet with him to take it further and see what we can do.
Thank you. We'll have a 3-minute suspension to allow the safe exit and entry of honourable and right honourable members. Order, order. Secretary of State Thérèse Coffey to make a statement.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Throughout this coronavirus pandemic, this government has put an unprecedented package of support in place to strengthen the safety net for individuals, families, communities and businesses who need help at this critical time. We recognise that this has been a challenging year for everyone, especially for those who've lost their jobs and those families who are feeling the extra strain, worrying about putting food on the table or money in the meter. The Prime Minister has been clear that this government will use all its efforts to make sure no child should go hungry this winter. This government also wants to ensure every child reaches their full potential. That is why I am announcing a comprehensive package of support to see these families through the winter months and beyond. Through the new COVID winter grant scheme, increasing the value of Healthy Start vouchers, and the national rollout of the holiday activities and food programme for the longer holidays in 2021. With Christmas coming, we want to give disadvantaged families peace of mind and help those who need it to have food on the table and other essentials, so every child will be warm and well fed this winter. Through the COVID Winter Grant Scheme, we are delivering £170 million to local authorities in England, starting next month, to cover a period until the end of March. This fund builds on the £63 million already distributed earlier this year, and as then, funding will be dispersed according to an authority's population, weighted by a function of the English Index of Multiple Deprivation. Any Barnett consequentials are already included in the guaranteed £16 billion funding for the devolved administrations. So there is funding available for every child in the UK, and I hope that the devolved administrations will play their part in this mission. Local councils have the local ties and knowledge, making them best placed to identify and help those children and families most in need. And it's important to stress that this covers children of preschool age too. Targeting this money effectively will ease the burden faced by those families across the country worrying about the next bill coming through the letterbox or the next food shop. Grants will be made under Section 31 of the Local Government Act 2003, and what is different from early in the year is that the grant will carry conditions and reporting requirements to ensure the scheme is focused on providing support with food and utility costs to vulnerable families with children affected by the pandemic. We will require at least 80% of the grant is spent on children with their families, providing some flexibility for councils to help other vulnerable people. We will also require councils to spend at least 80% on food and key utilities. Again, there will be some flexibility for other essentials. In trying to give children the best start in life, it is important that food for young children and expectant mothers should be nutritious. This will help in their future health and educational attainment. That is why we are increasing the value of Healthy Start vouchers by more than a third, helping low-income families to buy fresh milk and fruit and vegetables, helping to boost their health and readiness for school. So from April 2021, the value of the vouchers will rise from £3.10 to £4.25. The third part of our comprehensive package is the extra support that we will be giving children and families during the longer school holidays. After successful pilot schemes of our holiday activities and food programme, I'm pleased to let the House know that this will be expanded and rolled out across the country, starting from Easter next year through summer and the Christmas holidays, supported by £220 million of funding. Our manifesto set out our commitment to flexible childcare, and the expansion of the holiday activities and food programme has always been part of that commitment. Building on the successful delivery of the programme over the last 3 years, we are taking the learning and expanding it across England, as we have always set out to do. And this programme is being extended to all disadvantaged children and offers that vital connection for children during the longer school holidays of enriching activities like arts and sport, which will help them perform better in school, as well as a free nutritious meal while they are there. In May, the government provided £16 million to charities to provide food for those struggling due to the immediate impacts of the pandemic. I can today announce we will match this figure again, making a further £16 million available to fund local charities through well-established networks and provide immediate support to frontline food aid charities who have a vital role to play in supporting people of all ages. This package, taken as a whole, will make a big difference to families and children throughout the country as we continue to fight this virus. Madam Deputy Speaker, we are taking a long-term, holistic approach to ensure that we look at health, education and hunger in the round, not just over the Christmas period, but throughout the winter and beyond. And this is not just about responding to the pressures of winter and COVID, but about rolling out further the Holiday Activity Fund, which is an established part of government's approach to helping children reach their full potential. With this announcement, we are assuring that, as well as taking unprecedented action to protect jobs and livelihoods, we are also protecting younger generations. We are living under extraordinary circumstances, which requires an extraordinary response. But I'm steadfast in taking action to support all children to fulfil their potential long after we have beaten this pandemic. Social justice has been at the heart of every decision that this compassionate Conservative government has made, whether that be protecting over 12 million jobs through our income support schemes, injecting over £9 billion into the welfare system, or providing over 4 million food boxes to those shielding. And this is yet another example of how the government has supported people throughout the pandemic, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State Jonathan Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of her statement today. Madam Deputy Speaker, the opposition welcomes any move that will stop children going hungry over the tough months that lie ahead. And I would hope that statement would be true of everyone elected to this Parliament. So I still can't believe that the government has had to be dragged, kicking and screaming to the right place on this, and to acknowledge that in this country, in this day and age, no child should be going hungry. And I'm astonished that the government can stand here and somehow pretend we didn't all hear hours and hours of justification from them in this House just a fortnight ago on why they then thought the absolute opposite of what has been announced today. Madam Deputy Speaker, in my 10 years in Parliament, I have never been so depressed as when I listened to the comments made on those benches opposite during that holiday hunger debate and on social media afterwards. Not because of the disagreement on policy. Debate, disagreement, that is what Parliament is all about. But what I couldn't stand was the toxic commentary, the stigmatising of good people in hardship due to the economic mess this government is itself responsible for. I'm talking about the unacceptable insinuations about money for children's food being spent on brothels and drugs, with no evidence to back that up. I'm talking about Tory MPs attacking businesses in their own constituencies who stepped up when the government wouldn't, and using that to show that compassion to show evidence that financial support was no longer required for businesses. I'm talking about the same tired old clichés about state dependency at a time when it is the state itself that has had to close businesses and workplaces to deal with the virus. We even heard people who themselves have only ever known privilege show us they don't even know how poverty is measured in this country, and in one case didn't know the difference between how a median wage and an average one is calculated. It was unedifying, it was ignorant, and it was insulting to British families. So can I ask the Secretary of State to start with an apology for that debate and for that vote, because the tone of her statement today does not match the tenor of that debate. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, welcome as this statement is, as with every stage of the pandemic, the government has acted too late. Half-term has been and gone. So let me thank the real hero of the hour, Marcus Rashford. The Secretary of State, I think, might have forgot to mention him. But Marcus deserves immense credit for his campaign and for what he has achieved in such a short space of time. Because the depression that I and many others felt when we listened to that debate here in Parliament turned to joy when his activism unleashed the most incredible response from UK businesses over that half-term holiday. Even though they're facing extremely tough times themselves, they stepped up. And that is because in a compassionate society, it is a given that children should not be going hungry. But why did it take that extraordinary outpouring of community support to make the government see that? And let's get to the heart of the issue. All of this matters so much. All of this is so important because the social security system that we have in this country does not give people the support they need when they hit hard times. That's why this announcement matters so much. That's why furlough had to be invented. That's why the self-employed and contractors are in such a precarious position. In the announcement today, once again, the Secretary of State references the £9.3 billion the government has put into social security since the beginning of the crisis. So what I would ask the government and all Conservative MPs to reflect on is if you've had to spend an additional £10 billion and yet There is still so much incredible hardship and unmet need out there. What does that say about the system that has been created by you over the 10 years preceding this crisis? I note, by the way, there is still no sign of the Department of Work and Pensions review of food bank use, which was due out on October 19th. We all know what that will say. At the beginning of this crisis, the opposition asked for 5 urgent measures to stop families falling into significant hardship. The sharing of the £20 increase to universal credit across legacy benefits. Scrapping the savings threshold so savers weren't punished. Ending the punitive 2-child limit and the benefit cap so that people could receive what the government has already announced. And turning the universal credit advance into a grant, not a loan. Those 5 measures would have been a big step towards alleviating child poverty and giving people the support they need. And they are still required. Yet instead of acting, unbelievably the government is still on course to cut universal credit by £20 in April next year, when we know the pandemic will still be affecting people's livelihoods. That will be a cut for 6 million families. So can I ask the Secretary of State to spare Britain's families that brinkmanship, spare us the inevitable U-turn after the event, and on top of the announcement today, commit that the government will not cut universal credit in 6 months' time. For once, will the government make the right decision before it's too late?
Secretary of State.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And let me start by saying I welcome his support for these measures, but I'm somewhat disappointed by the honourable gentleman's approach. It's quite simply false to label this as anything other than a significant expansion of existing support measures and delivery on our manifesto commitments to support disadvantaged children and families. This summer alone, 50,000 children were in the Holidays and Activities Fund. As we've said, next Easter, summer and Christmas, that will be open to all eligible children in order to take part in that. And indeed, I think an additional 2,500 breakfast clubs have been started during COVID. I mean, I would remind the party opposite that their proposal to extend simply vouchers to free school meals recipients over Christmas would have cost just £40 million for the 2-week period, and only school-aged children would have been eligible. By contrast, Madam Deputy Speaker, our new package of support, building on the £63 million earlier in the year for the local welfare assistance funds, is £170 million that will last 12 weeks and support thousands more disadvantaged children and families. That's not to mention, as I say, the commitment to extend the holiday activities and food programme, the Healthy Start vouchers and food redistribution charities. Combined, recognising the barnet consequentials that will happen, this represents over £500 million of support for children and families in a much more targeted way, trusting our local councils who can draw on a variety of information that they have in order to make sure that we help the most disadvantaged and vulnerable people at this time. I think it's that targeted approach which really sets this out, and we will work with councils right up and down the country to make sure that every child is warm and well fed this winter.
Paul Maynard.
Thank you very much. As someone who did not support the government in the lobbies a fortnight ago, can I nonetheless welcome this announcement from the Secretary of State that will make a difference to tens of thousands, literally tens of thousands, in my constituency. Can I also praise ministers, for I know we've been working on this package not just over the past fortnight, but for many, many months, and congratulate their perseverance for the political maelstrom. Can the Secretary of State say a little more about where the projects are going to be delivered by local councils that will be making sure that the money is spent on not just meeting immediate need, but also on improving life chances for young people in the long run?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for that, and I'm conscious that that we wanted to make sure that this was a comprehensive package, and we actually referred to that, I think, in our debate a couple of weeks ago, that we wanted to make sure there was targeted intervention. He's right that as a government, we want to make sure that every child can fulfil their potential. I hope that through the schemes that we've announced today, the extended funding and the extended coverage, he'll recognise that that is probably one of the most important things that we can do to really make a difference to a young child's future life.
We now go to the SNP spokesperson, Neil Gray.
Deputy Speaker, thank you, and thanks to the Secretary of State for advance sight of the statement. I'm just sorry to say that as welcome as some of these measures are in themselves, they're just not enough. And they will only serve to partially catch up to where Scotland has been for some time. When the Scottish Government introduced its Best Start foods payment last year, the equivalent to Healthy Start payment, they'd already increased it to £4.25. The Scottish Government have also gone beyond its £70 million food fund commitment and made over £130 million available to tackle food insecurity caused by the pandemic. And on free school meals, I'm delighted the UK Government appears finally to be relenting to the incredible campaign run by Marcus Rashford. The decision today will no doubt be welcomed by the same Scottish Tories who failed to support this only 2 weeks ago. But the UK Government is only starting to give free school meals in the holidays from next year, while the Scottish Government committed last month to making £10 million available to extend free school meals into these Christmas holidays and into Easter. The need is now. And that's why it is so welcome that today the new Scottish child payment, described as game-changing by anti-poverty campaigners, opens for applications and payments will start early in the new year. But there's been nothing on the two-child cap, nothing on the 5-week wait, and they should make advances grants, nothing on the temporary uplift to universal credit. And in response to the significant campaign led by the SNP, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, Save the Children and others, now supported by her DWP predecessors and the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, the Treasury has been flirting with the idea of extending the much-needed increase to universal credit. And no wonder. Even with this temporary £20 per week extra, the Secretary of State knows that those out of work are £1,000 worse off today compared to 2011. So will she put on the record today that she would expect that temporary uplift to universal credit to be made permanent, and so that there is no longer unfairness with sick and disabled people on legacy benefits not getting the same? Will she finally commit to see the uplift expanded to legacy benefits too?
Well, I think the honourable gentleman, I'm not sure if he'd welcome these measures or not, and he'll. I think that he will see that the Barnett consequentials will feed through to the Scottish Government. I'm conscious that I don't think the Scottish Government did provide support over the half-term, but I'm conscious that future support was part of their legacy already. In terms of kind of moving forward, there are definitely aspects. I just want to remind him that, of course, advances are actual grants to people. It's just a phasing of payments of universal credit over the year and soon to be over 2 years, if that's what claimants want to have. And as a consequence, we need to make sure that we continue to manage with our customers to make sure that they have that financial resilience and that we will continue to try and support them in that endeavour. In terms of recognising, as I say, I'm sure that the Scottish Government will take full advantage of the money as part of that £16 billion between the three devolved administrations to make sure that they use it best and make sure that no child in Scotland goes warm and without food this winter.
Dean Russell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I completely understand the strength of feeling in the country around supporting children and families at this really difficult time. So I'd like to ask, does my right honourable friend agree with me that these announced measures actually, quite rightly, go far beyond any of the provisions recently called for around free school meals? And will my right honourable friend please provide the assurance to me that this is actually a measure which will provide the right support, targeted in the right way, in a sustainable way, long-term, as we laid out in our manifesto last year? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'll say I congratulate my honourable friend. He's been exemplary in his constituency in Watford in volunteering in order to ride out this pandemic, and I know that he will continue to serve his constituents well. In terms of, I do believe this approach is far more comprehensive in terms of the number of children. It will be helping, particularly focusing using local expertise, but also one of the things that people may not be aware of is that councils have access to people who are on benefits. Of course, councils, the upper tier, will hold who's on free school meals if they decide that's the best way to target support. But I do want to make sure that every child who is vulnerable this winter is supported, and I do believe our councils are well placed in order to make sure that happens, as well as the ongoing future activity for a child's future potential.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I do hope the Secretary of State will have the good grace to acknowledge and thank Marcus Rashford for his campaign, as I certainly do, and I welcome the additional support she's announced today. Can she outline to us how the funding is going to be allocated between all the local authorities in England? What will the basis for that allocation be? I welcome her reference to funding available for every child in the UK. So will she confirm that families with no recourse to public funds will be eligible for help from the funding she's announced today?
Well, I'd like to thank the Chairman of the Select Committee. In answer to one of his questions, it's the same approach that was taken earlier in the year to use population with a deprivation a multiple deprivation index. I think it's there should be a letter going out to colleagues today which should set out the amount of money that every council gets, but candidly take the amount that was distributed earlier in the year, which was intended to spread over 3 months from the beginning of August, divide that by 63 and multiply by 170. Madam Deputy Speaker, yes, of course I congratulate Marcus Rashford. He has shown his passion. He has shown his passion for wanting to make sure that no child goes hungry. That's a passion I share. I think it's a passion that everybody in this House shares. That's why we are working right across government. As we are today, we've been working with other departments in order to get this package together. It hasn't just arrived by magic. It's part of an ongoing plan in order to support families, in order to support children so they can do better in life. And that's why it's taking a holistic approach that looks at health, it looks at education, and continues to make sure that we will continue to have a family strategy, which again I'm working on with a variety of departments, so that we really do try and make sure that families are well and truly supported, including every child.
Steve Double.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for this announcement today, which is clearly an extension of our policy, making sure that help is targeted at those that need it most. And will she confirm that we have given this additional funding for this winter to councils because they are best placed to understand the needs of their communities and get the support to the families that need it most? And does she share my views that this should not just be used to replace to support those who qualify for free school meals, because there are many families who are not eligible for free school meals, and it's very important that they get the support that is available as well?
Well, indeed, my honourable friend is right, and I do believe that using councils is probably the best way, as they have a variety of information that I was referring to earlier, but also social services, health visitors. You know, this goes beyond children just at school, and we need to make sure that that information is well considered and in the round, so that where the children that need help this winter get it. I'm conscious that there are a variety of councils where people have asked why this is going to the upper tier. That's because those councils generally have a statutory duty towards children. But the best councils I've seen are working together right across their counties to make sure that they make full use of the levers of local government in order to help children, something which we share in this House and indeed our councillors up and down the country, regardless of what party they represent.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Nearly 4,000 children in Luton North, 8,000 children across the whole of Luton didn't know where their next meal was coming from last half term. Yet again, our wonderful community stepped up when the government stepped back. When the Prime Minister chose to ignore Marcus Rashford's campaign, it revealed a moral and compassion deficit that runs rife throughout his government. Does the Minister agree with me that she should ensure that no child faces holiday hunger again, not just for the winter months, but beyond this pandemic as well, starting by paying workers a real living wage and ending in-work poverty?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the universal credit system is designed to make sure that people working are better off than not working. And it's this government that introduced the national living wage, which has seen a huge lift up for a lot of people. Also, by raising the personal tax allowance to over £12,000, we've lifted 4 million people at least in order to not pay any tax at all. So the take-home pay of people has risen thanks to the actions of this government, and we will continue to support families. But under the In-Work Progression Commission, I want to go further, which is why Baroness Ruby McGregor-Smith is working on that, because we want to make sure that people can continue up the career ladder as well.
Steve Brown.
I have to say, Madam Deputy Speaker, I really welcome this package today. And most of all, because it's a comprehensive, it's a coherent and it's a funded plan. We are spending our constituents' money that's been put together outside of a political storm, and that has to be the right way to proceed. Can the Secretary of State confirm for me that support with food costs will not just be confined to families with school-aged children, but will extend to all eligible preschool children, because we have to make sure that we look after preschool meals as well as free school meals?
Secretary of State.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I welcome his support for this package. It is that comprehensive, holistic approach, trusting our local councils to really target the people that need that support. And he's absolutely right. Commendable as people may have thought that was in terms of the motion that was discussed in the House a few weeks ago, we wanted to make sure that every child who was at risk of going hungry this winter would be helped. And it's also the reason why we want to continue to make sure that that council approach with this additions to their welfare funds will, in order to make sure that they can really try and help make sure that people have the money as well, if necessary, to help heat their homes and prepare good, nutritious meals.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I join others on this side of the House in welcoming the Government's movement on the issue and pleased that they do finally agree that no child should go hungry in the UK. But the devolved administrations had their priorities on this issue right from the outset. But just moments ago we heard that this is a significant expansion in England, but that the devolved administrations are to make do with monies already announced last week. So can I ask the Secretary of State to explain why the devolved administrations are arguably being penalised for not only having their priorities right on this issue, but their sums right as well?
I'm afraid the Honourable Lady is completely wrong on that. One of the things that the Chancellor set out last week is recognising through the Barnett formula every time we do certain different policies, there's additional things which the devolved administrations want to do. We actually have a mature relationship with the devolved administrations. They've been set a guaranteed amount of funding, and I can assure the Honourable Lady that there is still more room in terms of Barnett consequentials, and I think that the Chancellor was right to make the decision that he did, and she should welcome it.
Christine Wakeford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Whilst I didn't support the Government in the vote a few weeks ago, like all across this chamber, I welcome the announcement of the COVID winter grant scheme, especially the inclusion of preschool children. There is, however, much more that we can be doing, such as the school breakfast bill in the name of the Honourable Member for South Shields, which I do look forward to working with my right honourable friend on in achieving this. Does my right honourable friend agree that putting on enriching activities through the Whole Day Activities Fund is a great way of both helping disadvantaged children and closing the attainment gap and ensuring they get a healthy meal?
My honourable friend is absolutely right about the purpose of the Holiday Activities Fund. I don't want to call it a summer school because it's not, and we certainly don't want to put off children from attending if they have that idea that it may be. But in fact, it's this element of enriching activities which keeps children, when they're longer away from school than, say, a week, you start to see children kind of dropping away potentially. So it's really important that we have that engaging element where people can have fun, can enjoy that, and it's certainly the evidence, it's my understanding from my honourable friends at the DfE, shows that it will help and is helping children in making sure that we improve that educational attainment for them, which is so important to their future lives.
We now go to Andrew Quinn.
Thank you. I welcome the package of support for tackling child hunger over Christmas. And as a Manchester City fan, let me pay tribute to that united hero, because without him, I don't believe that this government would have done anything here. Thank you, Marcus Rashford. But child poverty is serious, and it's not just about free school meals. It's also about the proposed cut to universal credit in April and the inadequacy of the local housing allowance that's pushing too many children and families into poverty at this time. Rather than U-turning again next spring, which is probably inevitable, why won't she do the right thing now?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm conscious that we did boost the LHA to the 30th percentile. I'm sure that may have helped some of his constituents, costing over £1 billion. Now, One of the things that I think we do need to recognise is what we are working across government on this, is what it is that we can do to try and help reduce the cost of living. I think there's quite an interesting paper by University of Bristol which talks about the poverty premium, and half of that is energy related in terms of about £250 out of the 490 they identify. That's why I'm working with people like my honourable friend, the Children's Minister, but also the Energy Minister and a wide range of people in this government in order to tackle issues which face not only the poorest in society but of course other households as well. And we will continue to do that, and I look forward to ongoing activity in and out of this government in order to make sure that we reach as many people as possible in trying to make sure that we can make their lives better.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I particularly welcome this very large extension of the holiday activities programme? And can my right honourable friend assure me that in rolling it out, the government will learn from some of the best deployments like Connect for Summer in Hampshire, with a focus not only on a nutritious meal, on the daily mile, on purposeful activity to address the holiday learning loss that she just alluded to, but also things like cooking from scratch workshops, first aid and whole family sessions.
Well, indeed, my right honourable friend, of course, former Secretary of State in the Department of Education, a notable one in that, is right to put his finger on this, that it's a comprehensive approach, and I'm aware that some of the best courses have included the whole family as well, into making sure that we can really help families build that sustainable, resilient future for them, with some basic elements as well as some really sophisticated ways to try and improve those enriching activities, which I'm sure they will enjoy.
We now go to Mohammed Yassin.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have received many heartfelt letters from SME directors who have received no financial assistance from the Chancellor, despite running successful businesses. Many have no idea how they will make ends meet for their families this Christmas, the families this government has forgotten about. Universal credit is not the answer. When will her government do the right thing and support these businesses through the crisis so they can be there to support the economic recovery?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Chancellor has been before this House on several occasions, as have other Treasury Ministers, setting out quite how we are supporting self-employed people. I'm very conscious that there is access to help through whether it's aspects of business loans, and for those people who don't have savings that aren't business assets, they can access universal credit. But one of the things about this particular scheme is that it will be for local councils to identify and decide who is eligible for that support. I'm conscious that the Honourable Gentleman wishes to see other elements, but I think that this is a comprehensive package from which many of the people he refers to may well benefit.
We now go to Robert Halfon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I strongly welcome the announcement, which I do believe shows a government committed to social justice, and I particularly welcome the Holidays Activities Programme. Will my right honourable friend give guidance to councils to ensure that accessing the £170 million COVID winter grant is as unbureaucratic as possible for families? And will she also confirm when Healthy Start vouchers will be digitised? Because we know that uptake was just over 50% in October nationally, partly due to the paper application form and voucher system.
Well, certainly I welcome my right honourable friend's support for this scheme, and he will appreciate, in particular, the Holiday Activities Fund to which he refers. In terms of guidance to councils about the winter grant, I'm sure they will work with a number of the public sector organisations in their areas, including valuable knowledge from schools. In regard to the issue he raises about the Healthy Start voucher, I'm conscious that take-up is not 100%, but I will ask my honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Health, to write to him particularly about that particular issue, the Healthy Start voucher.
Holly Lynch.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And like everybody in the Chamber today, I very much welcome this announcement. But will the Secretary of State join me in paying tribute to Calderdale Council, the Community Foundation for Calderdale, the Peace Hall and so many others in Halifax who came together to launch the Never Hungry Again campaign, made possible with donations from the general public, which plugged the gap of free school meals over the recent half-term. Following her announcement today, will the Secretary of State commit to reimbursing Calderdale Council for the resources it had to invest in order to ensure that no child went hungry over the recent half-term?
Secretary of State. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think throughout this pandemic, we've seen communities and councils come together in order to support those in more difficulty than themselves. And that's been a tremendous response by the people of this country. In regards to funding that was distributed earlier in the year, the £63 million allocated to councils, and I think it's fair to say that that was designed to extend from, I think, at the beginning of August through to October. Of course, councils used it in a variety of ways. If I take my own council, Suffolk County Council, of the 700,000 they were allocated, they actually added another 800,000 recently themselves to that, and they've used 600,000 total of the funds. So they wanted to make sure that, again, they were using the best knowledge to reach the most vulnerable people, and I'm sure that Calderdale Council can be congratulated in making sure they've done that too.
Now go to Mrs. Heather Wheeler.
Thank you very much again, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her statement? And does my right honourable friend agree that putting on enriching activities through the Holidays Activities Fund, especially in South Derbyshire, is a great way of helping disadvantaged children and ensuring the point that they get a free, healthy meal, which many of my constituents are so concerned about?
Well, I'm sure that the holiday activity funds will be a huge success in my honourable friend's constituency, as it will have her full support. I'm conscious that having a nutritious meal is part of that activity, but I'm sure that the enriching elements that they will enjoy over the longer holidays will be welcome relief, both for parents and for the children, and keep them connected to the ongoing progress that they can make in their educational attainment.
Now go to Chris Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State said earlier that advances are grants. That, of course, is not the view shared by the Cross-Party Select Committee, which describes advances as loans and should be replaced by grants. So can the Secretary of State firstly tell us when she will be in a position to respond to that report? And secondly, is she considering making the £20 uplift to universal credit permanent, which Feeding Britain estimate would stop 300,000 children going into poverty?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the universal credit that's given out is every month to benefit recipients is a grant, and the advances are just simply an earlier payment of that, and then the total amount over the year is spread over the year. In terms of, I know that I've been asked this question a few times. Madam Deputy Speaker, the discussions, as I've said to the Select Committee before, we have ongoing discussions with the Treasury about aspects of welfare support, and those discussions are continuing.
Number 18 withdrawn, so we go to Barry Shearman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, thank you. Can I say to the Secretary of State, I know her to be a very pleasant colleague and woman, but I have to tell her that I have never seen such poverty in our land in all my 40 years in Parliament. And all this today she's announced is too little, too late. And when she talks about working across government, I remember how they've got rid of Sure Start, how they've got rid of children's centres, and now early years in deep financial trouble that so many working families depend on. When is she going to do something across government to really tackle family poverty that stalks this land right now?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the honourable gentleman is a long-standing member of this House, and I'm conscious that he will be seeing things in his constituency undoubtedly exacerbated by the issues that we face in tackling coronavirus. It is a great sadness that so many people have lost their work or are on reduced hours, and that's why we put in the extra injection of over £9 billion of welfare support to help people through this time. In terms of helping young children, my honourable friend, the Minister for Children, is just reminding me about we actually have the most generous support for preschool children ever undertaken by government, and that's why we continue to want to make sure that every child reaches their potential. But the key difference is, Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps while I'm conscious of how proud the Labour Party was of Sure Start, Actually, we wanted to make sure the interventions that we undertook were exceptionally targeted so that every child really was able to fulfil their potential. And I'm confident that the measures that are in place now will continue to accelerate that because that's the right thing to do.
20 withdrawn, so we go to Margaret Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The people who've already had a mortgage holiday for 6 months aren't eligible for another one under the government scheme. So many people will be worrying about how they're going to keep a roof over their heads this winter. Furthermore, the scheme doesn't cover mortgage interest, so interest will still accrue during any payment holiday. Back in April 2018, the government scrapped the support for mortgage interest payments and replaced it with a loan, despite warnings from Labour that it will put low-income households at risk. So what consideration has the Secretary of State had? What consideration has she given, to reinstating SMI? And will she abolish the 9-month waiting period that renders the scheme unfit for purpose?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, in terms of one of the things she fails to mention is that for those people new to benefits, if they've had full contributions over the last 9 months, there is no cap on the benefits that they may receive. In terms of the support for mortgage interest, that is continuing. She's right to say that the government changed this from a grant to a loan. I actually think that's the right thing that we did because people have an asset and we are helping them keep that asset. I'm also conscious of the extensive work undertaken by my honourable friend, the Chancellor, in making sure that mortgages could be rearranged or payments that could happen. I'm also very conscious of the excellent work by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for MHCLG, on making sure that no evictions would be happening as a result of the issues that we're facing right now, except in more recently in terms of people who are nuisance neighbours. So that, I do think that we have done a lot to make sure that people can stay in their homes and keep a roof over their heads.
Mrs. Maria Miller.
Can I very much warmly welcome my right honourable friend's package of measures announced today to support families through what will undoubtedly be a very hard winter. But I know that she's aware that in constituencies like mine, more than half of those people who are on low income are in single-person households, facing a very different set of issues this winter. Can she confirm that the funding for programmes that help people through homelessness and particularly support rough sleepers and issues around mental health will not be diminished by the package of measures that have been announced today?
Well, my right honourable friend knows I know Basingstoke well because that's where I worked for so many years, and I'm conscious of the wide variety of community that is there, that is supportive of each other. In terms of thinking about other activities, I hope my right honourable friend will be aware of the £700 million package announced by my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for MHCLG, just last week to make sure that rough sleeping really does become history.
Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today's measures are reactive. They've been forced out of this government by the COVID pandemic and the epic campaign of Marcus Rashford. The truth is, last year, Trussell Trust had to provide 720,000 emergency packages of support to children in this country. That is more than 700,000 higher than when Labour left office in 2010. So all we're asking today is for the Secretary of State to be proactive. Scrap the benefit cap, scrap the universal credit delay, scrap no recourse to public funds restrictions, which will all leave children hungry across this country if the government continues to fail to listen.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if I think about the Holiday Activities Fund that we've been running for the last 3 years, this is a massive expansion of that, and I'm sure he will welcome that. In terms of building on what we distributed early in the year, £63 million, as well as the COVID summer scheme, £170 million will be there to make sure that every child has no need to go hungry in this country. I'm sure he will welcome that too. We will continue to work on helping people try and get ready to get back into work as and when the economy recovers. And we're doing that through our plan for jobs. I'm sure he will welcome that too.
Tom Hunt.
Thank you, Speaker. Over the summer, my honourable friend for Chelmsford actually visited me in Ipswich because we were one of the pilots where the Holiday Food and Activities Fund was in operation. And I can tell everyone in this House that this has been a long time coming, and it has been being worked on by government for a very long period of time, and it was very much a plan that they hope to extend across the country. This is far more ambitious than what was proposed in terms of simply extending the school meal vouchers into the holidays. This is unprecedented in terms of an intervention to help those who need the help the most, and I fundamentally welcome it. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that we all have a big job to do, both in this place, but also as government and as councils, to make sure that before December, everyone is aware of this fund, the profile is raised, so we can ensure that those who are vulnerable and need the help the most get access to it in a timely way?
Well, I completely agree with my honourable friend and neighbour on the excellent work that had been done in the Holiday Activity Fund in summer in Ipswich. He will be conscious of, again, the diverse community that he represents, but also the excellent work undertaken by Suffolk County Council, and indeed all public sector leaders, in trying to make sure that they've distributed the funds that were allocated to them earlier in the year and have added money on top. I'm convinced that I think it's £2 million that will be going to Suffolk, will really go a long way to make sure children in Ipswich, in my constituency and in Lowestoft and right across the county will be made sure that they will get the help that they need.
25 withdrawn, so David Johnston.
Speaker, I very much welcome this package of support today, which will rightly tackle more aspects of poverty than FSM vouchers could have. Regarding the additional support for Fair Share, we have one of their regional partners in my constituency called Sophia, which I volunteered for regularly in lockdown, seeing firsthand what a great job it does. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that charities like this are often better placed to understand the needs of their communities than central government is?
Well, I congratulate my honourable friend, and before entering this House, I know how dedicated he was to social mobility and tackling poverty, and continues to do so. In terms of, I fully agree with him that a lot of local charities have particular insight into their communities and are often helped by more national organisations like Fair Share. But they're not the only ones out there. There are plenty of others who are trying to make sure that we help people in different ways in terms of not only helping people get food on the table, but also some of the wraparound care, which is so important for families at this time.
Now go to Barbara Keeley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to raise the issue of carers and financial disadvantage. During this crisis, millions of unpaid carers have taken on more caring duties or started caring for a family member for the first time, and many of them are struggling to make ends meet. While universal credit was uplifted during the crisis to provide people with more support, there was no change to the level of carers allowance, despite it being the lowest benefit of its kind. Will the Secretary of State recognise the monumental impact the pandemic has had on carers' lives and introduce an equivalent uplift payment to universal credit for those carers in receipt of carers' allowance?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I heard part of the Honourable Lady's question, and I think this whole House can agree how much we value carers, not only as a government, but also often experiences in our own individual lives. I'm conscious that carers' allowance is not a salary. It is there as a benefit to help people who undertake that duty. And I continue to make sure that we try and offer as much help as we can as a government to not only social services, but again, how we can help people undertake those caring responsibilities in as flexible a way as possible.
Andy Carter.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I welcome the statement today from the Secretary of State? It's very much an extension to our policy, and it's adapting to the extraordinary circumstances we find ourselves in this country. Can my right honourable friend confirm that the £170 million scheme builds on the £63 million already announced earlier this year? And as with previous funding allocations, it's local councils who get that cash. In my constituency, it's Warrington Borough Council, because they're best placed to be able to deliver the support that local disadvantaged families need in this time of extraordinary circumstance.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and the people in Warrington will benefit significantly from this addition to, in effect, what is through the COVID winter grant, an extension of the local welfare fund, which we had already given money to earlier in the year, as he identifies. I think it's important that we continue to use the strengths of local councils in order to make sure that the help goes to those who need it the most and is really well targeted, and I'm sure that they will draw on every capability and insight in order to make sure that no child in Warrington will go cold or hungry this winter.
Mary Kelly-Foy.
Madam Deputy Speaker, last month members opposite took to social media to claim that free school meal vouchers were being spent on prostitution and drugs, as well as to criticise selfless business owners who stepped in to provide the support the government refused to. Will the Secretary of State condemn these comments by MPs as not only false, but as yet more demonisation of those in poverty by the Conservative government?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, this government continues to strive to help people who are vulnerable and disadvantaged, and we will continue to do that, and I welcome any support given in order to help local communities. I'm conscious that we need to continue to try and make sure we reach people of all ages. In particular, this grant is focused on children, but there will be flexibility in supporting not only local organisations to do the right thing, but I continue to welcome other organisations like businesses in a constituency who also reach out to help.
Jonathan Gullis.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Obviously, this is a very welcome package, and I thank the Secretary of State for giving this much-needed money, over £1 million for Stoke-on-Trent City Council, over £2 million for Staffordshire County Council. The Hub Foundation in Stoke-on-Trent, in the mother town of Burslem, is an amazing holiday club run by Carol Shanahan, and I really implore the Minister and ask the Minister, would she meet with me and Ms Shanahan to discuss how the holiday programme is one of those exemplary holiday programmes, not just locally but also nationally, and ensure that they get funding for the Christmas and Easter period coming up.
Well, my honourable friend with his vast educational experience will have been a true witness to the benefits that activities like the Holiday Activity Fund can really bring to the future potential of children. I'm very happy to say that my honourable friend, the Minister for Children, who will be leading on this programme, with support from my honourable friend, the Welfare Delivery Minister, I'm sure that they will both be delighted to meet him and the lady to which he refers, because we want to keep learning from success to make sure that every child in this country who is eligible for that support will get equally excellent educational and enriching activities over the coming holidays.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I came into politics because I had this feeling that politics was broken, and today's example of the Secretary of State coming in here and sort of using the words of social justice when announcing this package is just absolutely shocking. But I genuinely welcome anything that helps my constituents when I've got the fastest growing rate of poverty, child poverty in my constituency, in the whole of Yorkshire and Humber. And the country's compassion shone through, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it filled the gaps where the government failed. And I just want to put on record thank you to the Council, to Cafe West, Lower Grange, in Churches, Bradford Foundation Trust, Bradford Central Food Bank, who really stepped up. But one of the insults to all these businesses came from the member opposite, who suggested that she was delighted that businesses had bounced back from the pandemic to offer this support and should no longer receive government help. Does the Minister agree with me that that was a shameful comment?
To be honest, Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't really know what the lady's talking about, and I reject her assertion. And the comments that she made. I think she should consider them carefully. Honourable members right across this House want to do the right thing by children. We've been particularly affected as a country, as a nation, by the coronavirus pandemic. She should not underestimate what has happened over the last 10 years. Is that this government is in a place to actually extend the financial support that we have offered to families, to businesses, to other organisations, to many charities across the country. Frankly, it may have happened 10 years ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, but when Labour left government, they left nothing. They left no money left. It's taken 10 years of hard work, and the ongoing support to this country and the passion of this country in order to recover from the horrific economic deficit, and it's through that we are continue to able to borrow to make sure that the issues today can be addressed and that we will continue to bounce back, and things like the furlough scheme will have helped her constituents get through this difficult time, and I'm sad that she seems to have just dismissed it entirely.
Miriam Cates.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for her statement? And I'm delighted that in my constituency, Barnsley Council will be receiving over £900,000 and Sheffield over £2 million from the COVID Winter Support Grant, which will go to support our most vulnerable families this winter. And there's been a huge amount of coverage in the past few weeks about free school meals. But of course, this has never been a debate about school meals, which by definition are provided in school, in term time, and have never been intended to support families in crisis. So I welcome this comprehensive approach to supporting families who have been most affected by this pandemic. And this year, more than any other year, families' circumstances have changed so quickly. So can my right honourable friend confirm that local authorities will be able to use it to support all families, not just those who previously registered for support?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to welcome the funding that will support her constituents. And indeed, working with the local councils, we want to make sure that money does reach the people who really need it, not pre-qualification through other ways. And I do believe that councils are well placed, as I say, with a source of information to make sure that they help children not just at school age but before that. And indeed, they will have access to benefits data, they've got access to other data from social services, from health visitors, and so the list will go on in terms of where they can really then target their support. And I'm sure they will be helped by many local charities and organisations in her constituency too.
Now go to Beth Winter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Research by the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has found significant increases in poverty rates as a result of the COVID pandemic. Local and devolved governments in every country of the UK have now democratically called for pilots for universal basic income. There's a clear will across political parties and amongst the public for such pilots to go ahead. Will the Secretary of State agree to meet with me and other co-chairs of the cross-party group on UBI to discuss what support her department can provide for this important initiative?
I know the Honourable Lady is very interested in universal basic income. She once asked me a question that took over a minute in this House. The answer was no then. The answer is no now to universal basic income. I'm conscious that she's being tenacious on this matter, but she's really not going to get universal basic income happening under this government.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent North, and also I know my honourable friend, the member for Stoke-on-Trent Central, fully support this announcement. Unemployment is above the UK average in Stoke-on-Trent, so schemes to help low-income families and get people into work are absolutely vital. What steps is my right honourable friend's department taking to support those who have found themselves out of work to find new employment opportunities at the moment?
Well, my honourable friend is right to point out that while we continue to support people through the welfare system, we do know that the best way to ultimately get out of poverty is for people to work. That's why through our plan for jobs, we've been extending the number of training courses that people can do, considering for, in particular a new scheme called JETS to try and get people ready to go back into work. The jobs finding support scheme is particularly tailored to helping people who've been out in work actually for a long time, and this is a new experience for them in order to try and find work. And of course also swaps, where there are some sectors where the future does not look quite so bright for the next few years, and we want to try and encourage people to consider potentially swapping careers, even if it's just in the short term, in order to make sure that they can try and get back into work. And I think that was a successful programme which is already seeing a huge demand and indeed a huge delivery of these programmes.
Now go to Yvonne Favag.
Speaker, and I welcome the expansion of grants, but can I urge the Secretary of State to scrap the 5-week delay in claiming universal credit? An advance that has to be repaid over whatever period is a loan, and there is increasing evidence from debt charities that this is pushing vulnerable families further into debt.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, if somebody comes to make a universal credit claim, they can get money pretty quickly. I think within about 3 or 4 days. Yes, that's an advance, but that recognises an earlier payment of the sum that would generally be available over the year. Instead of getting 12 payments, a recipient will get 13 payments. So it's important that if people need the help, that they get the help, but then the payment will be spread over the rest of the year.
Kevin Hollinrake.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the co-chair of the All-Party Group for Poverty, can I welcome my right honourable friend's statement? I must say, despite the opposition's protestations, I don't remember any similar package of support being available in 2008 and 2009 when millions of people faced similar hardship.
It's very important we take a strategic approach. Could my right honourable friend outline how this strategy will dovetail with the National Food Strategy that was commissioned by this government in 2019 and has made some similar recommendations?
Well, my honourable friend is right to point out that the government continues to want to try and support people through this particularly challenging time and has put its money where its mouth is, frankly, in order to get that direct support to families and indeed businesses and communities more generally. In terms of the National Food Strategy, Henry Dimbleby has produced his initial review. The government will at some point, once I think we get phase 2 of his work and suggestions, will then develop a food strategy. But I think we're all united in making sure, in particular through the Healthy Start voucher, that we want to make sure the food that young children and expectant mothers have is nutritious food, because that's really important for the development of our young children.
We now go to Dr Philippa Whitford.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, the UN Special Rapporteur on Poverty highlighted that disabled people have been among the hardest hit by 10 years of this government's austerity agenda. They are particularly reliant on legacy benefits, which, unlike universal credit, have not been increased by £20 a week during the COVID crisis. So will the Secretary of State now commit to a permanent increase of universal credit and support disabled people by extending the uplift to all legacy benefits?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, the people can move to universal credit, apart from that small cohort of people currently receiving severe disability premium, but they will be able to make that move from January. I think it's important that people do check to see whether they will be better off. We think the vast majority of recipients would be better off on universal credit than they are on legacy benefits, and we will do what we can to try and help them in that journey.
Caroline Ansell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank most sincerely my right honourable friend and the ministers who've worked intensively in this period to bring these measures to the House today. They are so incredibly welcome. They will make a real difference to children in Eastbourne and Willingdon, and I recognise that they go further, wider and deeper than the motion that I supported just 2 weeks ago. I particularly welcome the extension of the holiday and food activities programme, not least because we've seen schools close in this year and the learning gap widen. This will very much help with that, but it also will be very impactful. It's new to Eastbourne. I've only seen the success of pilot schemes in other areas, and that is something that I hugely welcome. Can she assure me that the good practice of other areas will be shared with county councils who don't have the experience in delivering these programmes to make sure that every child benefits to the maximum?
Well, I thank my honourable friend's contribution there. She's right to recognise that this support package is much more comprehensive in reaching disadvantaged children, and particularly welcome her support for the national rollout of the holiday activities programme. In terms of best practice, yes, not only will there be guidance, but I'm genuinely hoping that we can do something innovative to how we share best practice between the most successful schemes and encourage charities to, of course, in a COVID-secure way, find out really what is happening in different parts of the country so they can be well prepared for when these programmes start in Easter.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And while I would welcome this latest U-turn from the government in supporting children, I would ask the government to consider the fact that there are still millions of people in this country who have had no help, no support, no finance from this government at all since March, like the constituent I spoke to on Wednesday who is at her wits' end. Will this government reconsider? Will they consider universal basic income? And will they extend the help that we have at the moment to the excluded?
No, we will not be doing universal basic income.
Last question, Siobhan Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was always going to be a long-term and local approach that was going to be the best thing to help families. And I feel quite emotional about this because I was told I was starving children, I was killing children, I had the worst abuse ever, and I abstained because I wanted to help the government look at that long-term approach. And if the benches opposite really thought there was going to be starving children over the half-term holidays, you would not have brought that just before the half-term holidays. The local approach is working, and I would ask the Secretary of State to give praise to charities like the Long Table and the Freezers for Love initiative and Pagan Hill community groups, and say to them that the money and the funding will be there because they know where the families are that they can help.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, it's nice to see my honourable friend back in the House after her maternity leave, and she speaks with appropriate compassion. She's recognised some of the local organisations in her area. I would encourage her to work with them and her council in order to make sure that the way that a lot of this funding, this £170 million, can be effectively distributed to make sure that the most disadvantaged children and families are truly helped. And we want to make sure that that activity continues of support for those similar children in terms of the Holiday Activity Fund.
Thank you. In order to allow the safe exit of honourable members participating in this item of business and the safe arrival of those participating in the next, I'm suspending the House for 3 minutes.